mio suor, un regal cerco sul crine posarti, e gelti il treno vicino al sole. Le dolci brezze del patrio suolo, regal cerco sul crine posarti, regarti al trono vicino al sole, un trono vicino al sole, un trono vicino al sole.
Peace from the heart of Luxor. I heard the discipline of God, and I perceived it as the manifestation of his order. Out of the chaos and dimension of mortal mind and confusion, I perceived the luminous orb of Christed intelligence strike as from the star Draconis deep onto the pyramidal line. And I saw the chamber of the king, and I saw the chamber of the queen, and I saw the pyramid of lives, and I saw the master mason draw his line, and I saw the security of the divine geometry. I saw the cubit stone, and I saw the measure of a man, and I saw how that every man must strive to fit the master plan. And knowledge was needed, and a torch, and the chamber must be traversed, and initiation must come, and man must pass from death unto life. For the sun and the moon and the stars and the luminous orbs of creation are concentric focuses, orbs of light, masses of light, masses of energy, of density, of outpicturization. And man is so, and knows it not. For the whirling galaxy within is also under dominion. And as a ship without rudder or compass or captain, so do compassless lives cross uncharted seas, and individuals are lost, hearing not the voice of the ancient mariner and the voice of truth that parts the veil of mortal lies and leads men to pass from the bondage of Egypt across the Red Sea, beyond the desert of Sinai and into the land of promise. It is most unfortunate. But it is true that in the disciplines of men, their hearts are often so familiar with the cadences and lines of truth that scar tissue has formed upon the seat of consciousness within them until they can no longer derive satisfaction from the holy tenets of our faith. And our faith is in purpose, and men must learn to still the mind as one would grasp a blade of steel and thrust it not forward 1/4 of an inch until the command to do battle was given. A soldier exercises control and heeds the call of the captain. The disciplines of life are inflexible. Otherwise, there is no discipline. The cold calculations of aspirants to our temple are in reality from the fires of the hearts of those who have heard our voice and have prepared themselves by reason of need and of weariness to the bone by the density of mortal desires, perceiving that they must forsake the way of the flesh, shunning it as a plague, and determining to pursue the best gifts and graces of the Spirit. There are many young men today in the world who consider themselves fearsome and tough, who consider that they are capable of meeting the challenges of the world, but the challenges of the Spirit are considered for sissies. I think they have much to learn. Their premises are wrong. The basis of their concepts are wrong. They lack compassion. They lack understanding. They lack wisdom. And baneful thought. They know it not. To be ignorant, we can understand. But to know not that one is ignorant is a tragedy of considerable dimension. Our lamentation, then, is that men may awaken to a realization of stature in the eyes of God. Now, men do not need to come to Luxor in order to find liberation. Only the strong may come here who aspire to overcome a sea of troubles during an episode called a lifetime. There are those who are content, and I do not think the beloved Kuthumi minds it, to sit at the feet of the Master Kuthumi or at the feet of Jesus. But I would remind them that when Jesus was ready to fulfill his great mission, that he came to us in Egypt and offered himself in the service of the light. Just as Egypt has been a land of shadow and pain, a land of bondage, a land of sand and brick and mortar, of confusion and sensuality, so has Egypt been the repository of great stature and great light under God. We here at Luxor have held firmly to the rigors of the disciplines of the infinite. We have determined to uphold the cosmic law and the cosmic effort and make it, where possible, translatable into understanding on an individual basis per se, so that any part of life would be able to embrace the tenets of our temple and comprehend that out of darkness light can come. Yes, I am aware of the fact that simplicity is the keynote of the hour. And I am aware of my curricula, and I am aware of that which I am speaking about. For I seek to illumine a few in this room, because there are many who are not yet ready for the disciplines and understanding which I seek to convey. The cone of fire pulsates from dullness to the brilliance of the white light, and the residual ash is consumed itself, and the egg of the serpent must not be left, for it can well bring forth not only a serpent or a sea serpent, but a dragon. And thus the cone of fire must be preserved until the blinding light of transposition, of transmutation, does consume the dross and produce the fruit of the cosmic egg. The ovoid of the infinite is within the capacity of mortal men, but then, when invoked, they are no longer mortal. But immortality is of high price, and it demands the allness of men from the smallness of men. For men can only give that of which they are capable. The capacity of their externalized selfhood must be given in toto, and there is no need for men to seek our treasure without giving all. The holding back of the smallest particle of individuality as possession is forbidden in our retreat. And total surrender is the order of the day. We are not hungry for chilas, but for quality in those who come. And while many are turned away, even as many leave, those who are left understand that the planetary needs must be served from the spiritual design, so that on this planet the yearly quota of ascensions may be kept up to par. Some may say, why is this so? And so I shall reveal it in part. When the lords of karma examine the world aura with a view to seeing as to whether or not the continued allotment of light shall be granted to the planetary body, thus providing a great harmony in nature and the perpetuation of the four seasons, there is always the need to answer the question as to how many graduate students have actually matriculated from the planetary curricula, from the school of earth experience. One of the demands of the lords of karma is that a stated number of individuals must graduate each year in order to maintain a stable planetary grant of light. Therefore, our training school is of grave importance to the destinies of the people of earth, and whether or not they are aware of the greatness of this school does not matter, for we are aware of it, and those who come here for training are aware of it, and the striving of their spirits to hold congruence with the triads of light is very beautiful to behold. One of the activities of our retreat here at Luxor is attunement with the seraphic hosts. Now, some individuals may not at first understand with what body angels come, nor do they understand how conveyance is made unto individuals seeking greater light, of that light by the seraphic band. But then, the process of digestion and assimilation is not necessary for men to partake of the fruit of the earth. And thus, what is really important is that the consciousness of men and women who come here is changed from glory unto glory for the cosmic purposes of life. We are interested in a stable community at Luxor, and we have no need then for emotional sycophants who desire to come here and then cry for their earthly mother. Men and women who come here are selected because, in essence, they are the lonely ones whose every thought and desire is the fulfillment of cosmic purpose in a finalizing act in that specific embodiment in which they come. I may as well tell you now that among the people in this room, there are very few of you who are willing to make the sacrifices, that is, what you would deem sacrifices, requisite to attend our retreat. But there are a few. And therefore, I have decided tonight to bypass the many. And I have decided that whereas in times past I have made appeals to the many, that I shall not this night ask so much as one iota of devotion to our cause from those of you who are not willing or ready to give lavishly of your allness. But I shall concentrate on the building of the pyramid of light for those of you who reckon with immortal destiny now and are not content to put it off embodiment after embodiment or until mañana, which never comes. The Brotherhood has need of devotees of great light. Therefore, in reality, I shall make a confession to you concerning a certain discussion recently held by the Karmic Board in connection with the Universal Catholic Church, which functions out of Rome. There was considerable applause here when the message was flashed forth that the papal nuncios had decreed that the priests of the church were not to be permitted to marry, and that celibacy was to continue in force. I tell you this only because it indicates a certain degree of devotion to causes of infinite light on the part of individuals who, while they may lack a great deal in understanding of our brotherhood, at least have the willingness to enter in to that which other men consider a sacrifice. To give oneself to the Divine Mother without reserve, to determine that one will have naught to do with the opposite sex purely for spiritual reasons, is perfectly in order, providing it does not become a cause for stiff-neckedness toward other parts of life who may decide to go the route of family father. Both are needed upon the planetary body. And discipline is the requirement of this hour. In an age when a lack of discipline is strong in the world, and rebellion against order is everywhere manifest, right while the secular society continues to exhibit a certain stability which men look to, I think it is essential that order be examined from within by mankind as heaven's first law. If order is heaven's first law, how can we then permit men to contemplate chaos or disorder as possibly giving rise to something of virtue? The very power of the mind of God which framed the world was to draw energy into a cohesive whole, so that design by universal law could manifest through a cosmic geometry as all of the myriad forces of nature with their many patterns, helixes, cones, squares, circles, and many other geometric figures. The use to which nature has put all of these various geometrical forms ought to show mankind that the mind of God has indeed drawn upon the knowledge of cosmic geometry to produce in the world of form a perfection of order which is very beautiful in structure. Contemplation of that by mankind ought to show that no happenstance was involved in the mysteries of creation, but only a magnificent pattern of delight and order and intent and purpose. If this purpose manifests as the harmony of nature, then this purpose as order and discipline in the lives of the aspirants who would have their ascension must come forth now. I am speaking now to individuals throughout the planetary body who are not attendant here at Luxor, but who desire to matriculate along the same lines as our chelas do here and participate in their own ascension at the close of this embodiment. To you I say, a more than ordinary discipline must be given. You must understand that to embrace in principle a certain goal without the willingness to do all in your power to achieve that goal is a sign of great weakness which ought to bring some element of shame into manifestation in consciousness. But this shame is without virtue itself unless it also possesses the power to goad an individual to seek for the disciplines of spirit which will enable them to perform the somewhat complicated maneuvers in existence that shall provide them with the necessary spiritual energy to oppose the opposing forces, to close in and join in the battle against the destructive elements in their own nature, which are residual from all of their many embodiments, which have a tendency to come up at the very moment when the individual determines that they are going to make the greatest progress. Because darkness is always invoked by light, men must understand that theirs is the forte of vigilance. I give you an example. When individuals begin to seek for their ascension and begin the process of externalizing divine grace in sufficient quantity to assist them to that end, there is always a very definite action of shadow and darkness which converges upon the force field of their identity and seeks to thwart the plan which they have begun to conceive. This we call the testing of the metal. And like the dross upon gold ore, as the fire of refinement is applied, this scum must be skimmed and disregarded. You will always find those who, as in the days of Don Quixote and his windmills, will desire to fight against the paper tigers of the air, who will desire to thrash their energy forth in a vibratory action of resistance to life. This is not needful. For all resistance should not be turned against life, but against death. For death is an unnatural state. The very body of man was designed in reality to continue forever. And I shall say this because it is truth. And this is the secret of the strength of the heart as an organ of great power. There are certain factors in the evolution of man which have caused the toxins present in life to inhibit the actual expansion of light within the bloodstream. And thus, the cells of the body affected by toxin have caused the very body cells to, in a sense, devour themselves. This is a strange process which is not recognized by man for what it is. It is simply called the approach of old age, but it is a calcination and densification of thought and feeling which refuses to renew itself because its purposes are not universal, but centered around the egoistic manifestation of the individual monad. The piece de resistance of man, then, against it is very slight, and men are often prone to accept death not as an enemy, but as a friend. I call to mind the words of the great ones that clearly state the last enemy that shall be destroyed is death. I think that the Scriptures ought not to be wrested to man's destruction, and therefore this enemy, which I choose to define as such, is the enemy that must be fought against with every ounce of energy in your being. God is life, and death is the antithesis of life. How could it please God for life, which is himself, to be extinguished in the domain of the individual, seeing it was God who sought to deify the individual, and man who sought to demonify himself? To deify is to exalt the God plan. To make man into a demon is simply to reduce the vibrations of his consciousness derived from the Christ as initial impulse to the state of the mundane, mondo, the world. For he who loves the world and the things of the world does not have the love of the Father. And we are not referring to the clouds, to nature, and to beauty. We are not referring to the love of communion between hearts and the assistance of brother to brother. We are referring to the passions that infuriate men to hurl them into conflict with one another over trivia. Let not the sun go down upon your wrath. When men hurl anathemas at one another and charges which may or may not be founded in truth, there is never any blessing to any participant in such activity. Therefore, harmony among peoples is the power of the great white brotherhood. Harmony among peoples is the goal of the ascended masters. And unless harmony is preserved in the force field of thought and feeling by people, deterioration will produce surrender to the enemy of death. Harmony is the greatest implementation to life. And those who would rob you of your harmony would steal your life. Guard then your harmony, that the cone may have little residual ash, that the dragon's tooth will not be found within the dragon's egg. We understand manifestation of divinity, and manifestation of affinity, and manifestation of the dark ones. We understand the manifestation of Egyptian sorcery, for we have seen it work. We know how that by sorcery men seek to harm those that they suspect may harm them. And this too is not an affinity with God. It is the seeking of perpetuation by life without adherence to divine principle. The Luciferians were such. The Satanists were such. The Mephistolian concepts of mortal men who seek to perpetuate for themselves a place in the world order is similar to the temptation of Christ, as the serpent spake unto him and said, Fall down and worship me, and I will give thee all the kingdoms of this world. In reality, the men and women who choose the world will lose their soul. Some who have come to our retreat have said, Beloved Serapis, as long as I will lose my soul anyway, if I choose the world, why should I not lose it in divine seeking? And I have answered, to plunge into the ocean of infinite love, even though the soul would be absorbed and not recognize that love, would be better than to dwell in the tents of the world's greatest sheiks. And it is true. For when the last breath goeth out, and Yama has fulfilled his own activity, and the flesh attains to the dubious quality of corruption, it is the sustainment of the soul and its own standard that is all that endures of the man. Family, friends, treasures, riches, even the flow of ideas ceases in the mortal consciousness and the brain. But all externalized truth and obedience to cosmic law is etched by the angels of fire and record upon the akashic substance for each life stream. Thus it was recorded of old in the archives, whatsoever a man shall sow, that shall he reap. There are none who can defeat this law. Neither sobriety nor levity will produce in the consciousness of man any change in this unalterable substance, the substance of cosmic law. I wish to say at this time that it is in little ideas such as I convey that men are able to summon the best virtues for the moments when they are tested, and reality is born in the soul. The soul is the substance upon which is reflected the reality of God. The actualizing of that reality is similar to the process in the manufacture of rubber known as vulcanizing. Individuals should reckon with the factors of mind and memory and understand that the folds of memory are filled with unclean substance. This substance cannot create a pattern of adherence. the best materials must be used in order for individuals to weld substance together that will become wholly unified. There is never then any need for individuals to expect that those qualities of thought and feeling which are less than the Christ perfection of life to be joined unto the God flame of reality that is within. Men cannot build out of mortal substance immortal bodies. They cannot build out of mortal thoughts immortal ideas. They cannot build out of mortal feelings divine feelings that enfold the world and create the great pyramid of life. The great pyramid of life stems from the giant square of the divine architect's mind, a mind that has all right angles and produces out of the four corners of substance the beauty of perfection rising from the spheres of mortal dimension. Let men understand the meaning of this, for the base of life is in form, but ariseth out of form. The social order, the order of individuals, the order of nations, the order of hierarchy, all orders are constructed geometrically, and the cubit stones that compose these divisions, becoming then unifications through cohesive force, are held together by the power of love that deems no sacrifice too great. The sacrifices then that men make for and on behalf of immortal life are no pain to the soul. The outer self may pass through the crucible of experience and enter into the domain of immortality. But I am certain that you will recognize that the avoidance of cosmic responsibility does not prevent man, endowed with immortal life by God in the beginning, from receiving the full measure of his karmic responsibility. We cannot imagine how that individuals would perform some of the acts of disservice that they have performed through the ages and betray the great cosmic energy that has brought them to a place where they can begin to build spirals of construction. Yet I tell you, this has occurred from time to time. And in the case of these messengers that are serving here in this center, there are two individuals who have moved to this city ostensibly to serve the cause of the light, who have become defectors of extreme blackness and sorcery without even recognizing that which they do. And therefore they have turned themselves from the light into the darkness. And there is a certain responsibility in that connection with the incident which occurred a little while ago. I hope that those of you who are aware of that which I am speaking will understand that it is not a matter of castigation of those individuals, but of warning that they understand that this is an age intended to be an age of enlightenment, when the best gifts and contacts must be admired for their devotion and service to the light. It is not a point of individuals pouring homage upon mortal selves. It is a point of respect that men ought to have for all things that are holy and that seek to uplift humanity into the domain of spiritual discipline. It is the undisciplined mind that finds fault with the messengers, for the messengers have offered themselves in good conscience to our cause, that they might provide an avenue of expression for the ascended masters in the world of form. I tell you, as an adjunct to mankind's making the ascension, it is essential that individuals understand that again and again currents of great magnitude have flowed into the world of form through the consciousness of these beloved children of the light. And mankind, in some cases, have sneered at the manifestations of power which entered into the world of form. But one day they will not sneer, they will not snicker, and they will not laugh, but they will recognize that every contact with the powers of light, with the great pyramid of cosmic life, from the heart of the great and grand architect of all creation, is an assistance to mankind in the world of form, whose hearts have become attuned to outer conditions to such a great degree that they seldom recognize the divine geometry. You then, to whom the word is given this night, who aspire to the disciplines of the Spirit, should understand that a tightly knit order of things is essential, because without the closeness of the cubit stones, the pyramid could not adhere together. For even the pressures of roots and grass would separate stone from stone, and therefore the closely knit construction that smooths the way for each stone to fit against another is the compassion of God and the design of the grand architect that smoothens the way and enables harmony to exist in the consciousness of mankind. Mankind will become divine kind, for this is the purposes of all creation. I have specifically tonight desired to have your attention on the light, and this is why I am speaking to you and why I have emphasized the cone of fire. The cone of fire is indeed necessary in order for individuals to understand that out of the circle of the fire and the dot in the center of the circle signifying the first monad and signifying the expansion of the monad from the base circle to the apex is essential. The cone of fire is involved with the spiral, the constructive spiral of manifestation. For out of this energy is given the pattern by which man may rise in divine symmetry, without flaw in the ideational patterns of his existence. Unless this shall occur, the smoothing of the way will not make it possible for individuals to shape their tube of light as they ought to in preparation for the ascension. Now, I do not expect that those who are not actually readying themselves for their ascension by an extensive preparation will understand the meaning of the cone of fire. But when it is understood and light and fire become synonymous, individuals will understand how that space can be hallowed by divine thought and feeling. They will understand how that a given amount of space, so many cubits of space, can actually reflect either light densities or vacuums of consciousness. If vacuums of consciousness are filling that space, this is indeed a lack of light within the cone of fire, and intensification must occur. I know of cases on record, and one particularly that took place in Paris, France, long ago, where an individual near Paul the Venetian's retreat did actually start the creation of the cone of fire at 7 o'clock in the evening, and had created a matrix of such strength by midnight that he ascended the following day at 1 minute after midnight. In other cases, I have seen individuals strive alchemically to create the cone of fire, beginning in an embodiment during medieval times and culminating in their ascension at the beginning of this century during the life of George Washington. Do you understand what I am speaking about? I am speaking about the span, not of ordinary earthly centuries, but the span that leaps across the centuries. It is as a spiral of wire. The energy does not necessarily then travel around the wire circle by circle, but through induction and magnetism suddenly makes the whole animated by the principle of divine soul. This principle is universal cosmos. It is cosmic essence. And this principle can, as a spark leaps a gap, flash forth through all the coils of manifestation. And the ash, the residual ash, will fan out from between the coils and fall to the floor or to the ground. I would like to point out that there is a certain waste in the white ash, and the white ash ought not to manifest, but often does because of a lack of preparation on the part of the aspirant. Let men understand that by constructive spirals of thought, by disciplines of mind and heart, without any strange states of consciousness, individuals can fashion the ascension spirals. Some individuals are prone to use the power of mortal imagination and do not recognize that we are dealing with the true geometric figure. We are dealing with true geometry. We are not dealing with imagination. We are dealing with fact, with the spirals which are closely knit, with the spirals which follow the cone pattern, with the spirals which stem from the base circle of identity, and with the desire for cosmic purity, which is akin in miniature to the cosmic central sun behind the central sun. By the power of a 3 times 3, then, the triad of manifestation can produce the fruit of the ascension within the force field of the individual. But as these spirals become closely knit, men must understand that there is a definite responsibility to the cubit stone, and the cubit stone of identity must itself conform to the necessary patterns whereby there will come about the manifestation of individuality in accordance with cosmic principle. Today, men are functioning haphazardly, producing individuality by reason of personality aspects in being. When we are involved with cosmic law, we are involved with identification with unity. When you identify with cosmic unity, you will have a similitude made in the likeness of God, and therefore there will be a very definite pattern of similitude in all. And while ascended masters differ after their ascension because of individual patterns which are retained as productive of their individual contribution to life, I wish to point out that there are certain inescapable acts on the part of each individual which must conform to a definite spiritual similitude and cannot vary one iota. Unless this formula be followed, the mercury, the salt, and the earth will not be properly proportioned. And our experience, your experience, and the experiences of mankind will not conform to the same pattern. Unless there is a conformation by mankind seeking this light, there will only be produced another spiral of error which must be undone. It is as though a stitch were dropped in a knit, and one must unravel all back to the stitch and commence all over again. Some individuals are not willing to do this, preferring to abandon the project, and thus the wedding garment is not woven any more in that embodiment because of discouraging tendencies in their nature. The science behind the ascension is very great indeed, and the contributions necessary by mankind to the world order would build in the world order a pillar of great beauty, a pyramid of lives in harmony, a pyramid of architectural grandeur. Then the green sward will stretch toward the four corners of the earth. Then the pyramid will glow. Then the fire of the Spirit will transmute first the base stones, and the capstone will be the last to glow. For all energy in the capstone is from on high, and that which is in the base is from below. But the qualifications of the base must conform by reason of thought and devotion to the pattern from on high, and thus the fire will be drawn down first to the base stones, and then the capstone supported by the base stones will glow as the sweep of the great electronic stream from the heart of God moves down symmetrically and in perfect divine order through the entire structure, causing the pyramid to glow on the greensward. And it will come to pass that with the accomplishment of the capstone crowning man's achievement, the civilization of the golden age, the permanent golden age, will begin. And then the destiny of America and of the world will be outpictured, because the pyramid of lives will have adjusted itself in conformity to divine principle. And the grand mason of the universe, the eternal God, will himself express satisfaction by causing to descend out of heaven the hand that carries the torch. And when this occurs, that which is below will manifest that which is above. Ahura Mazda. Ephratha, for the chariot of fire shall rumble through the heavens. For Zarathustra has returned to his heavenly home. Lux Regis. I thank you. Our Father, who art in heaven, expand the bonds of thy brotherhood, radiations among us. Dissolve our concepts that relate to the human ilk, to the manifestation of mortality, of sensuality, of defection from the light of thy face, and replace it with the tenderest grace possible to us this night. Lift the burden from every individual in this place, regardless of its weight. Sweep down now, beloved Seraphim, beloved Seraphim. Sweep down and take out of every heart every hardness of expression, every feeling of futility, every idea and concept born of human vibratory action. Replace it now, tonight, by the love light that worships and adores purpose, that worships and adores and rejoices in purpose, that is glad and feels a sense of gladness for all of the wonderful communion we have with the kingdom from above. Let the light of Serapis be understood. Make known to us the meaning of these hieroglyphs, of these fiery symbols. Make us to know truth and help us to understand it. Help us to understand one another, and in the nobility of effort, to lift one another upward, to tear down no man, but to consume in ourselves all dross and all sense of loss and all ideas that are less than perfection. Help us tonight to replace them by a new sense of direction, by a new sense of life, by a new hope, by a fervor that shall never deny our true self. This we ask in the name of the living Christ who stood at Luxor's altars, that the purity of the white ray may express tonight and today is our prayer. So do thou then this night, O Serapis, expand thy light, expand thy light, expand thy light, and let there be no human density that cannot feel it. Let there be no individual here that cannot receive the power of its healing rays. Purity expand, purity expand, purity demand perfection, demand protection to the God ideals in every life stream, and help us to gently respond to thy ministrations. Help us to gently respond, to accept it as a beautiful crystal goblet filled with the rainbow hues of the reflected light of God. Let our whole consciousness be transfused by thy substance, by thy rainbow rays, by thy compassion, by all that thou art. And as we separate outwardly now, let us draw closer together within. That compassion over sin and darkness and density shall free us all from human propensity. We thank thee and accept it done right now with full power in the name of the living Christ. May light rule, as Serapis declared, and may we no longer fool ourselves by human knowledge that has grown dim. Let the light within be the light of our life. We thank thee.
Send your love to God. beloved, hear now the words of my heart. I am your Father, ascended and free. A long time ago, I walked the hills of earth into God's heart, but not apart from thee. I am Enoch, and I walk with God. Now through the veil I come and go. Immortal friend from secret place on high, I come to help you home. O children of light, hear now the words of my heart. I am not gone, just stepped through the veil. Now I appear to open the door for thee, if you will walk and talk with God and with me. Let truth be your companion, be attached to integrity. Walk, my children, in righteousness. Come walk the paths of peace. Great is the Lord, and greatly to be praised. O love the Lord with all of thy soul. O love the Lord with all of thy heart and mind, with all of thy strength, and he will make thee whole. With all of thy strength, and he will make thee whole. With all of thy strength, and he will make thee
Through the veil I am come. How easy it was to love him. How easy it was to know him. How easy it was to walk with him and to commune with him who had everything to give and so little to receive except the satisfaction of conveying the best gifts of himself. And this is the nature of God. And I taught myself to understand that as it was the nature of God, that it must become my nature also. And then it became no longer foreign to me to understand that to drink at the fountain of his strength was to imbibe the divine nature. It was as a fire within my veins, within my mind, and the meaning that echoed down the corridor of the centuries later, saying unto mankind in the Mosaic covenant, as proclaimed by the Christ, thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, with all thy strength, with all thy mind, and with all that the Lord God giveth thee. was an old and familiar cadence to my ears. And we behind the veil, peering upon seeking mankind, heard the old familiar echoes expressed by the living law that died in the hearts of men through ignorance and unbelief. We could not come forth from our octaves of light to change the face of the planet. There were dark days when there were no prophets in Israel. There were dark days when the planet was without little save a solitary communion with the Most High God. And I remember the days when Sanat Kumara held the balance of power for mankind, and men sought in pictograms to depict animal forms upon the caves and upon the walls thereof, and all the old ancient grandeur of civilization, the old Ur of the Chaldees. And how I love the sound. Ur of the Chaldees. Ur, city of light. And basis of the later word to follow, culture. The sound of light. The sound that light makes. The light and sound ray. The proclamation of eternal liberty for all who will hear it and obey. And there were old civilizations, and there were old systems of worlds, and the world but little notes and long remembers the travail that came to the hearts of the great ones when the brothers of the shadow came to the planet and spread hatred between brothers and brothers. And when the spirits of the dark ones were multiplied upon the face of the earth, and when the beauty of the women was perverted, and the uncouth giants of the type of Goliath came on the scene, uttering their veiled threats that caused mankind to tremble by the might and main of steel, while he who had parted the veil of purpose behind which he stood with his ineffable light was concealed from mankind by his own devices, and there was no need for the mystical knowledge to be written in cipher, for man could not know that which their heart could not comprehend and span by the breadth of their consciousness. And their consciousness was a dimness, a numbing strand whose vibratory action was as a harp out of resonance, a loosened string from the moorings of infinite law and purpose. We who have seen the elder civilizations and have watched the span of the centuries and have understood how that albeit man was created, as was written, out of the dust of the earth, he was crowned with more glory than was ever resident within the dust, albeit the dust bringeth forth the beauties of the rose and the lily and the tender daffodils, and all that causes men's hearts to be glad, for they speak to men of immortality. But we understand the meaning of the resonant harps of fire, which man has lost the knowledge of. We understand how that the stars do sing, and that the spheres do peal, and how that through space the stellar music does cause the soul to drink in the spirit of infinite love. And if men for one moment suppose that this love is without science, let them think again. For the knowledge which God gave to us in the elder days of art was the knowledge of himself. And within the Godhead, there is no need for discovery. For when one has the whole circle, all of the parts are there. Discovery stems from concealment or from the lost use of an art. And discovery is also, in higher reaches, the infinite expanding its own nature. But this is understood at ascended master levels of comprehension. And it is the sphere to which the Christ ascended. Let it be understood that in the mind of God, every single living son of his presence is beloved. But when the beloved Son, cast as a prodigal one and a wanderer among men, enters into the vibratory action of human nonsense and neglect, and foreign vibratory actions take over the control of the mind and being of man until he is no longer able to understand the simple beauty of pure truth. He is bereft of any dialogue with himself. And in this state of consciousness, he can but turn to the outer husks of identity and seek there to perhaps gather some possibility of temporal happiness. Thus was the word lost. Thus was the divine art taken from the mind and being of man. And so, in the journey of discovery across the desolate wastelands of self, men have smiled at a little rose that bloomed along the wayside, and they have been content with a tiny silver spoon when the whole banquet table of immortal love was ready to descend into their presence and lavish upon them the purity and beauty and appreciation of eternal purpose. But eternal purpose was not spurned first by mankind. Nay, they did it in increments. They did it by losing little powers and little treasures. One by one there slipped through their fingers the tender pieces of the cosmic infinite jigsaw puzzle. The puzzle of immortality, reality, identity, and compensation. For men sought without for that which was within, and the tenderness of divine grace escaped them utterly. And this caused travail in that strata of the heavenly society where communion with the lesser objects of divine affection supposed from the human level was made. From the divine level, God would convey to each part of the stratification of himself the full compassion of identity and grace which that part was ready to receive, and the chalice of mankind's receptive consciousness was the determinate factor in the release of cosmic light into his world. Thus each individual did determine for themselves exactly how much they should receive of divine grace, and there never was any plan for delay. For the now was the doorway or nexus of cosmic opportunity, and time and space did not exist in the consciousness of God any more than a canopy of expression, a canvas upon which was intended to manifest the best gifts and graces God was wont to bring to man. And yet the elder brothers could not convey, because they could not find the ears to hear or the hearts to understand the infinite capacity of love. For when men are captured by the idea of human vice and viciousness, they, I am sorry to say, come to a state of consciousness where they say, let us get him before he gets us. And thus the concept of kill or be killed, of stab or be stabbed, of defraud or be defrauded arose in the consciousness of men, and they forgot all of the golden rule which once had been vouchsafed to them by the cosmic law and from the hand of God, for long before Moses ever brought forth the tablets of the law. This law did exist in the very heart and being of God, and the 10 Commandments that were externalized to Moses of old was given to him at the precise and exact moments when the children of Israel did dance and make merry and praise the golden calf. This did not deter the Most High God from conveying unto Moses these laws during the precise moments when betrayal was taking place. And thus we understand the meaning of betrayal, of treachery, of viciousness. Every vibratory action whatsoever that is human and below the divine level is a manifestation of man who is less than man. For man who is the fullness of man is the divine. For man is but the term for manifestation, and manifestation was intended to be the fullness of cosmic felicity and happiness. Every grace that man could possibly enjoy as potential was there waiting to be given. But man had no chalice of receptivity, for his consciousness was devoid of its possibility. And thus the secret of it all was communion. And communion was the lost art, and this is that to which I was addicted. And there were some who laughed at me. I recall on one occasion, prior to my own reception into the Godhead, how that a group of youngsters did see me in meditation in a grove. And as I knelt there in holy prayer, and there stepped through in full view a magnificent angel, these youngsters did durst to stone my flesh. And this was not recorded by men. It is not a part of historical accuracy, but of Akashic truth. They did stone my flesh. And I did fall upon the ground, and I did weep, and I did plead that their souls be purified from the stain. And 3 of these young men subsequently became God-identified and were the 3 Hebrew children, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who were within the fiery furnace at a later epoch in life. And thus my prayer was not in vain, for I was able to see the end from the beginning. And this is the divine quality that does not condemn man, for he understands that the man whom he condemneth may become a Christed one on the morrow. And he prays that that may be done. For only by its being done can the world be saved, and one by one men escape from the millstone that hangs around their own neck and pulleth civilization downward. It was not the divine plan. It is not the divine plan. It never shall be the divine plan to destroy. And all of the elements of destruction prevalent in society and in consciousness stem from mortal competition and a sense of inadequacy. The woeful attitude of men who fear lest they shall please some individual. Let them rather fear lest they fail to please God. For God is no tyrant commanding men's attention. He is no tyrant demanding that men shall give him all things which they have. It is God's desire to give them the best gifts. And if the gifts which they esteem to be the best are mortal ones, then God has permitted them to enjoy those mortal gifts which they desire. To the hurt of their souls and the lack of the fattening of the souls of men with the manna of God that cometh down from on high. But consciousness changes, and there flies from the domain of consciousness the ideas of mortal idiosyncrasy. Tender is my heart, O God, because thou hast touched it with thy hands. And I heard thee walking in the grove of trees, and I knew that it was thy spirit rustling the leaves. And I perceived the hearts of men as zithers of fire, and I knew that thou wast there, and thou, O God, wast my desire. And behold, I saw thy host descending, filling the world with light unending. And I knew that chaos must, by grace, yield unto the holy place, where the ark of God would draw for man the fullness of the heavenly plan. Divine one of greatest light, flood, O flood my soul with light, and let thy light forever be my joy for all eternity. I cannot fail if thou art here. Thy presence makes me not to fear. I know that when thou comest, Lord, thy fullness now and ere adored will make me see that where thou dwellest, there the joy of heaven dwelleth. And I too shall be with thee in every heart that's taught to see the comprehension of infinity. And what is that? A little cloud of light that expands in the darkness of consciousness until there is no night in the consciousness. God is reality as no man has ever seen reality. And until a man has seen God, he is not yet the pure in heart. And thus, many of the secrets of life are concealed from the eyes of men because they have put the cart before the horse. They have reversed tragically and almost comic tragically the concepts of universal law. It would have enabled them to build block by block, stone by stone, temples of light and towers of might into the realm of spiritual achievement. Somehow or other there is a great dichotomy in the consciousness of mankind that seems to cause them to fear lest they should, in losing their life for the sake of the light, somehow not find it again, whereas the reverse is true. When they are immersed in the consciousness of the world, in the miasma of the world, and the destructivity of the world, there is no room in the end of their being for the Messiah who cometh. For Messiah cometh to every individual. And it was by the light of the Christ, who before Abraham was I am, that I achieved my God realization. Through the doorway of the Christ, I am the open door which no man can ever shut. That I receive my entree into the fullness of the divine. And yet today men have identified as the sinister powers of strategy intended them to the Christ of universal love with the mere identity of the great Master Jesus, and supposed that the unique qualities of the Son of God were conveyed alone upon him to the hurt of all men, who then would be forced to come into the light only through the manifestation of the man Jesus the Christ. Whereas the reality of living truth in all universal consciousness is that everyone before Abraham was I am, to the present hour, and in all hours to come, is permitted through the universal consciousness of the firstborn Son of God, the only begotten Son of God, the light of God that never fails, he by whom all things were made, who in the beginning brought forth the heavens and the canopy thereof, to receive grace through him who could in truth utter the word, saying, I am the open door which no man can shut. And this Christ's Spirit is the reality of every man that shall ever walk into the kingdom of light and receive his cosmic birthright. Without this Christ, man would indeed walk in darkness. for he also was the one by whom all things were framed, and without him was nothing made that was made. Jesus, the great elder brother and friend of all mankind today, was indeed the Son of David, the Light of David, who dwelled upon the earth planet as David long before he manifested himself as Joshua, son of Nun, who discovered in the days of old the power of how to lead the children of Israel, and sent Caleb into the land and did go to discover how that they might recover the land of promise for themselves. Thus, let men understand that the immortality of life and the plans of God are universal indeed for all. And thus, long before the manifestation of He to whom all Christendom bows, as the man Christ who became embodied in the body of Jesus, there was and always will be the Son of the infinite Mother, the man-child, who is the manifestation of cosmic law among men and is universal to them all, both the great and the small. Thus was I able in days of old to step through the veil and to be no more as a man of the world, but join the ranks of the immortals. Now then, I have an admonishment this night of great serious to give to all. You have heard it said that man should take heed lest he lose his soul or become a castaway. Just as it was possible for me then to walk with God until I was not, for God took me as an integral part of himself, so no man can see God except he be pure in heart. To be pure in heart means that he must conceive of naught but good in any man. For so long as he can conceive of evil in any man, he is unable to have the purity of law that will uphold the plan. For mine eyes are too pure to behold iniquity. The eyes of God and the power of the mind of God could never conceive of that which he could not create. And God could not create evil. Evil came about by a misapplication of reverse alchemy. When men decided to use the free will vouchsafed unto them by God to create according to the evil imaginations of their own hearts, which did not stem from the Godhead, from the balance of the threefold flame of wisdom, love, and power within their hearts, but rather from aberrations in the central triad pattern. The central triad pattern is an equilateral triangle. Men must understand this, that it does bring about consummate balance in the being of man, love, wisdom, and power in perfect balance, producing love for God and love for man, producing wisdom from God and wisdom from man, balanced according to the divine plan, and produces also will, not only the will of God, but the will of man, which becomes still to the divine plan and accepts it. For when there is no congealment or recognition of the need to absorb the law of the divine one, it comes to pass that the plan escapes and the atoms have no magnetism. There is no power to direct the electrons, and thus it is mere imagination and self-indulgence, haphazard manifestation, and not the perfection of cosmic purity. The law is perfect, and balance is its name. And thus, those who understand the meaning of the divine flame will understand that the will of God could not be ignored. In the Luciferian rebellion, it was the desire of the hordes of Lucifer to produce a counterplan to the divine one, which they felt would be superior because of the vast intelligence of their leader, demonstrated to them in contrast to their own relatively weak status. Let all recognize then that allegiance to the divine, that is true allegiance, without wavering or instability, would have prevented them from falling prey to the destructive forces of the Luciferian temptation. Fall down and worship me. I will give thee the kingdoms of this world, for all are mine. It is written, thou shalt worship the Lord thy God, and him only shalt thou serve. By the understanding of this, the serpentine law could not have triumphed over the will of man. And thus the way to communion with God is the way to communion with hierarchy. And thus the way to communion with God is the way to purity of heart. And thus the way of purity of heart is the way to divine expression sooner. And thus the way of purity of heart is the way to communion purer. And there is a relative state where you deal with infinite laws. I am the open door which no man can shut. It lives within you now. It is the same law that of old brought to Melchizedek his freedom and awareness, that he was indeed wrought by God without father and without mother, that he was priest of Salem, priest of peace, because the middle wall of partition was broken down by the universal Christ consciousness, and direct communion was established from the pole of man's being, the negative pole that was the reflection in the pool of matter miasma, and the perfection of the infinite power of God shone forth from the positive pole of God identity. I am that I am. 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 And as the voice fades, it begins in the spirit, and I shall now say it through thy bones, beginning first with a minor crescendo, and then leading onward and upward into a greater one. Listen in the stillness as I say these words, with a sound that cannot be heard by your physical ears, but will be sensed by your being. Step through the veil and come to me when you can, for every ascended master stands ready, willing and waiting to illumine you when you shock the consciousness of self and ego and seek the consciousness of God that liveth and is. Split the veil in the temple in twain. Move the impulses of life no longer in vain. Isis unveiled is that which is and is. Isis unveiled is that which tis and tis until the triumvirate of man and spirit and purpose are wedded to bliss and purpose and bliss and purpose and bliss and purpose. As transcendence beyond transcendence parts veil beyond veil, and the ineffable glory of God is left to shine by the power of liberty and freedom into the hearts of men, that every little child that ever comes forth from the womb of its mother, even as the first man-child came forth as a pure spirit, a springing spirit in strength and light came forth the Son of God, he whom God visioned to uphold his position of spirit and purpose. It is not good for man to be alone. And thus the law does for all atone and bring a unification of purpose into view, that men may aspire at first to be the few who shall become the many, many sons of God, to be captured by his love, to dwell beneath his rod. O purpose of the diamond heart, come forth and spur these souls. O purpose of the diamond heart, enfold before their gaze the goals of life eternal without end. A life when brotherhood defending shall create the cosmic blending of the hymn of cosmic love, the hymn of cosmic law that from above invokes the awe of justice and obedience pure. Free these souls, make them endure against the hotter of the crowd, that they may learn to shake the shroud of all delusion, fear, confusion, darkness, bruising soul and mind, understanding and now finding all that is of God and kind, kindred ones with hearts now blending, molded by the sacred fire, through the power of the Spirit, captivated by desire flowing from immortal purpose, causes all to see their way. I am light, I am birthless, deathless, God is in me, he is day. In him is no night of purpose, no ulterior plan for man, only visions of his greatness. God is great. I am. Amen. Thus the great Master Enoch has returned through the veil.